We're live. We are doing a BYU versus VCU preview podcast, an extensive preview of the first-round matchup between BYU and VCU. The A-10 champs, Ryan Odom, coach Virginia Commonwealth. Chase, we got the bracket selection. Before we dive deep into this game and really get into the nitty-gritty of it, how do you feel about BYU's draw? You finally get a night's rest. We're recording late Monday night right now. So you had over 24 hours. What's your initial reaction to BYU's draw?
I really like it, Carter. The more I look at it, the more I think it's really perfect for them. They are playing teams that they can beat. And we've seen the teams that are able to kind of expose BYU, and that's teams like Houston, right, which there aren't a lot of. And we've seen teams that they thrive against, and I think they're kind of surrounded by it. They also got to avoid the very top-heavy 1 seeds, right, unless they make an Elite 8 run. And they were able to really draw some pretty favorable matchups. They also got to play in Denver, and they get this 2 o'clock game, which is huge, which we're going to talk about here in this preview. So after looking on it, sleeping on it, I think it's a great draw for BYU. I think 6 seed is also what they deserved. I think it's right about where they should be, and I can't wait to watch them, see what they can do with it. It's a great draw.
I think it's an unbelievable draw. I 1,000% agree when you look at it, because you compare, you go, okay, they're a 6 seed matchup with the 3. You look at the other 3 seeds. The only other spot they could have been in is the West because of the Sunday rule. The West is a gauntlet. We were talking about that before we started recording. You look 1 through 4 in the West, you go Florida, Texas Tech, St. John's, Maryland. Are you kidding me? That is a nightmare draw if you're the 6th seed over there. Missouri sitting there and Missouri got Drake on top of that, who I think Drake might be even better than VCU. And so if you're BYU versus Missouri, that's the position you're looking at that point. Or you could say, okay, BYU, you could be in Memphis' spot at the 5 seed if you get a little bumped up over there. Even Memphis is in a tough spot. They're an underdog in their first-round game to Colorado State. And then your Sweet 16 matchup, you'd have to go against Florida. I think it's a great draw to get BYU as far as they possibly can, realistically, while accommodating all the Sunday rule stuff.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Carter. As I've also been thinking about it and thinking about how awesome a season BYU's had, the last 2 months have just been incredible to follow this team and cover them, and also to watch as a fan. None of it matters at all. Everything rides on Thursday afternoon. This is the biggest game of the season. It is all about Thursday afternoon.
And I'm going to follow the John Fanta sentiment here. If you aren't taking off work, if you aren't faking sick, if you don't have some kind of excuse to get out of your responsibilities on Thursday afternoon, shame on you. Figure it out. Make it happen. You knew BYU was playing on this Thursday. You assumed, we warned you. If you listen to this podcast, we warned you they were going to be playing in the day session as well. Look, you get a nice little buffer period. If you're on the East Coast, you should be in the clear. They're not playing until, 4 p.m. Eastern time? You should be able to get out of work an hour early, get out of there, peace out. But you're in Mountain Time. Look, man, you got to get out of there. You got to get out of there. You got to get home. You got to get to a local restaurant, wherever you're going, and be in front of a TV before 2 o'clock rooting on BYU, because all of it comes down to this game, Chase. Look, we've talked about preseason, great Big 12 expectations. They did very well, finished top 4 in the Big 12. That's great and all. Nothing matters other than Thursday afternoon. And Chase, we talked about it. Now, I still think this reigns true. I still think BYU making the tournament, this is a successful season. It's fine. It's great. Whatever. But I think they do need to win this game on Thursday to feel great about this season. And I think I feel good about this season right now. In the moment, if BYU lost to VCU, I would obviously feel a little icky about it. And then you take a step back a month later, you go, look, Kevin Young's first year, look where they were at one point in the season. They rallied back in that way. Look at the talent you got coming in. Okay, it's not the end of the world. Good season. Win a game, great season. Anything on top of that, if you make a Sweet 16 run, we're talking about an all-time season in Provo.
Yeah, I think what we tend to forget about this BYU basketball program as a whole is there's kind of a shadow hanging over them when it comes to NCAA tournament success. There's been very little of it. Like very little of it. You can think of obviously Jimmer going to the Sweet 16. That was the extent of it. Awesome season, of course, and they were very close to advancing to the Elite Eight there against Florida. And then you have, I mean, what other instances even come to mind? The Danny Ainge, right? The furthest they ever got that Elite Eight run. That is it. I don't even know if they've gone further, and this might be bad podcasting. I don't know if there's been better seasons than that. Getting to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight before. And so this is a legit thing for BYU. They haven't won a tournament game in over 10 years, and that's when they had the Wooden Award winner, literally the best player in college basketball, a generational college guy who changed the game in his own right and is a BYU legend. You kind of have to break the stigma here. And so I totally agree with you. I can see a future where BYU does lose this first game, and we get on this podcast. We start consoling the fans, the chat. We're like, look, guys, still an awesome season. Look at where they were at the beginning of January. Look at where they got to. I mean, it's just one game. March is tough. It's a crapshoot. I don't think we can think that way, and I don't want to think that way. I think you need to start changing the culture of BYU basketball, and I think they're doing it in a lot of ways. Recruiting, NIL, the coaching staff, the NBA pipeline stories coming in, right, with some of the players that you have. All that has changed, and now it's time to change the narrative around BYU in this tournament, because it's not pretty. They do not have a great relationship, and now is the perfect time to do it with this team, with this talent, with this coaching staff, with all the momentum you have. I think Thursday is going to be big, not just for this season, but for BYU's program heading into the future and kicking off this new chapter with Kevin Young.
Think about if they get a tournament win, the momentum that swings into next season, swings into this major offseason BYU has upcoming. The momentum, like you talked about, Chase, going into next season will be at an all-time high, and it just changes the trajectory of this program. And like you said, cast that dark shadow out of here, because you look at BYU's NCAA tournament history outside of the Jimmer year, they've made the second round twice in the last 30 years.
That stinks.
No.
That's awful.
Sorry. Bad math. 32 years. 1993, 2010, and 2011 are the only times they made it second round and beyond.
That's awful. It's just stinky,
first
dude.
round. Just round is 64 to death.
And in this tournament, like March Madness is so trendy. There's so much superstitions, and when we go and pick these brackets, right, we think of like, oh, this team just doesn't win, right? You know, this team does win. This team does figure, all these things. It's super, super, super trendy. And so if you're a bracket picker, you're like looking at these trends. You're like, BYU just doesn't win these games. They don't win these games. This is a toss-up for me. I'm going to go VCU. So you need to break that stigma. You need to start a new trend of your own, and they've done it. They've done it in so many ways this season, breaking up all these trends with completely whitewashing the coaching staff and then bringing in all these new players. So this is your chance to start a new one of your own.
The disturbing trend is that this will be BYU's fourth straight tournament appearance facing an 11 seed. And in their last three, they lost to Ole Miss in the first four in 2015, 90-94, and we all remember UCLA and Duquesne, obviously.
Yep. It's like, it's a little eerie if you think about it. If you're a superstitious person, you're really like, oh, crap, man, here we go again. But the one consolation, if you are superstitious, and we're not talking, legit X's and O's here right now, but if you are superstitious about that stuff, this is a completely different program. Everything's changed from those last losses, except for Trevin Nell, the one constant, and a couple other players, of course. But things are completely different now. This team is different. The style is different. Everything's different. The jerseys are literally different, except for obviously from last year. So this is your chance to start it off, kick off a new era of BYU basketball. No better way to do it than success in March.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Let's get into it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. BYU versus VCU preview right now. Right now, the Vegas odd makers has BYU, wherever you're looking, between a 2.5 and a 3.5 point favorite. The analytics and Ken Palm and Bart Torvik would agree, have them about it as a 3.5 point favorite into this one. Now, we briefly touched on it. Chase, we've watched a lot of film on this VCU team, studied a lot of tape and everything. What are your thoughts going into this game?
Initial thoughts is VCU is a little bit different than anyone they've faced before. They're obviously very well known for their defensive presence. That's kind of the narrative around that team. They don't shoot the three at an amazing clip. They can be streaky. They've had some games where they go off completely, and then they've had some games where they look like they can't hit water out of a boat. They are led by guard heavy play offensively, but they also rely on their bigs for the majority of the rebounding and then holding down that defense. With these guards, it's not a whole lot of super aggressive ball pressure where they're up in your face, but they are very handsy. They have one of the best steal rates in college basketball. And so from a defensive end, it's a little different. BYU is kind of used to these guards being in your face, getting in your mug, trying to out physical and out athlete you. But VCU's style isn't quite that way. They like to lure you in and take advantage of understanding what you're doing, anticipating your plays and sets, being in the right place at the right time. So BYU needs to be crisp offensively, making smart decisions, passing, running your sets, reading those defenses and reacting to it rather than just brute force and physicality getting to the hoop like we've seen maybe in Big 12 play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment of this team. And like you said, they're not anything BYU has necessarily faced. It's a different team when you watch them on film. Like, I was trying to figure it out. It's like if you put a little dash of Texas Tech, Cincy, and West Virginia all into some weird mix in a way, where it's like they have these certain tendencies where they can muck it up if they want, but that's not necessarily exactly what they do because they can score the ball. They're not necessarily a super, super slow team by any means. They're relatively similar in pace. BYU, I think, is a little faster, especially as of recent. But when you watch the film, Chase, they are streaky from three. That's why I had the Cincinnati comparison a little bit because the Jizzle James factor of it, where these guards can get streaky. Like Max Jolka, he can go off out of nowhere in this game. I know BYU fans will hate hearing the name Jizzle James again, but that is something to watch out for in this game. And that makes me think, okay, are we going to see Trey Stewart come in and trying to guard him? Or is Mawit Mag going to be on a guy like Shoga in this spot to limit VCU lighting it up from three? Chase, what do you think are the keys for BYU to be successful in this game?
I kind of talked about them offensively. They need to be patient and see the floor, but also stay aggressive offensively. We talked about it all season. You need to touch the paint. Get to the paint, then find the open shooters. And you obviously need to shoot at a decent clip. I think BYU is due for a good shooting night. I expect them to be about their average. I think if they can do that, they'll be good. Defensively, you need to focus on not allowing penetration back. VCU's top four scorers are all guards. And BYU's weakness, as we know, defensively is tough guards who can create for themselves. Max Schulg is definitely one of those guys. And so you need to be able to neutralize them in this setting. That's where guys like Trey Stewart and Mawit Mag are going to be huge, but also holding it down the back end, not over-rotating, not over-helping. Do not allow a chance for VCU to get hot because it can happen. And if it happens, then you're going to be in trouble very fast. And so just being there on the ball, closing out hard and being on your assignment is going to be huge. And then the last thing I'll say, Karter, push the tempo, be the aggressor early, get out in the front court and just get to the basket, get fouls, get VCU on their heels a little bit, make them start to play from behind and chuck up ill-advised threes because then that's where you kind of have them right where you want them because they're taking threes. They're not shooting at a great clip. That's what you want if you're BYU.
And then you can get long rebounds and get out in transition, and then boom. That if you're getting in a fast ball game, BYU's winning this thing 10 times out of 10. And that comes back to my key for this game. It's March. The number one rule of March Madness, Chase, guards win in March. This game's going to come down to Dallin Hall and Yegor Demon. Richie Saunders, I assume he's going to get his. Kaba Kate is going to be a monster underneath and get 10 rebounds, 10 points, and 4 blocks or whatever. Mawit Mag's going to play great defense in this game. Hopefully him and Kata can stay out of foul trouble. But this game is going to be decided between Yegor and Dallin Hall because VCU likes to press. They're a heavy press team. It's a little, you got a little Shaka Smart stuff sprinkled in there as well. And I listened to Jeff Goodman interview their assistant coach today, and he talked about, I was like, yeah, we need them to press well. We need to press this BYU team. And look, we've seen BYU handle the press in years past. They haven't been great with it, but now they have a guy like Yegor, and I think Yegor can be very successful against a press. It's tough to press a guy who's 6'9" and can see over a press and start throwing those outlet passes over the top. So I think they can have success there. Yegor and Dallin have to limit their turnovers in this spot. VCU will punish you with these turnovers, especially the way they play defense. So they got to limit turnovers. And like you said, these two guards have to get to the paint. VCU gives up a ton of points to guards driving in the paint. In all of their losses this year, they've given up, and the top guards on these teams that they've played where they've lost have averaged 23.3 points per game against them. Guys are getting downhill. You can have success against VCU driving to the basket. Yegor in that pick and roll, I think, is going to have success, and that's where I think it is similar to the West Virginia game, that first matchup where Yegor and Dallin were able to get downhill and get layups in that game, and that's going to be key, like you said, forcing VCU into some foul trouble a little bit, and that's when Dallin's at his best, man. When Dallin's getting downhill and driving, that's when he's at his absolute freaking best, and that's going to be critical in the spot. These guards are going to be huge, and you talked about pushing the tempo. The altitude is a major factor in this game. And even their coach talked about it where they played in New Mexico earlier this year. I said, you know what? I should probably go back and watch that New Mexico game. They were out of gas. Those guys were huffing and puffing in New Mexico. They're going to have to play against a BYU team that wants to push the tempo, and BYU can run them out of the gym, Chase. We saw what happened when Kansas came to town. Kansas was huffing and puffing that entire second half of that game. BYU's like, let's run these guys out of the gym. Kevin Young even talked about that in his pregame speech to his players. Like, hey, let's run these guys out of here. That's going to be such an advantage for BYU in this game, is the altitude, and especially VCU. They want to press. They want to play super aggressive. So I expect that first half to be a little rocky, low scoring maybe a little bit in that first half because you're playing with overinflated balls. Guys are nervous. It's a tournament game. But then that second half, when BYU is able to push the tempo and run and gun, I think VCU is going to run out of gas in that game. And I think that is absolutely critical in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's going to be juiced. Obviously, biggest game of their lives for most, if not honestly, all these guys. You know,
everybody
compared last season, right? You could say that was the biggest one. Well, they lost it. This one is now the biggest one. Biggest game of the season for all of these cats. It's going to be BYU heavy in that arena. It's Denver. It's a quick 7.5 hour drive for a lot of people. I already talked to multiple people who are heading out there, students, people that live in Denver, where there's plenty of members of the church within an hour radius of that stadium. So there's going to be full BYU fans. It's going to be juiced. I know that Kevin Young, he brings the fire in those pregame speeches, and this is the biggest game. We saw them be a little juiced, early on in that West Virginia game in Provo, as well as that Utah game in Provo, and it was very slow starts for BYU. I don't want to say like you can't afford a slow start because they've shown that they kind of can. They've started slow in a lot of these games and been able to pull it out. But I think March, it's safe to say, is a little different. These halftime adjustments that we've grown to love and become accustomed to, they just need to be made before the game. And the biggest one, it always seems that halftime adjustment, Carter, is go to the basket. Richie comes out in the second half. He has 6 quick points and goes to the free throw line twice because he's just all of a sudden like, oh, I need to be aggressive. He drives baseline. He gets pump fake. He gets fouled. They need to start that right away. The game plan offensively needs to be inside out, not outside in to start. I know it's fun to get the crowd in early with some big threes in transition, right? Or to just be pulling up from deep. You need to be consistently getting to the basket here. And then everyone who's played basketball, coaches it, watches it, knows this. As soon as you do that, everything else outside will open up. And then you find your shooters, Dawson, Trevin, Richie, all these cats who are going to be ready to shoot in that moment. So like you said, VCU is vulnerable to guards getting on the inside. And Yegor Demin and Dallin Hall are 100% at their best when they are in the paint. Dallin is a good shooter in his own right. Yegor's improved his three-point shooting throughout the season. But you are at your best at the rim, both passing-wise and scoring-wise. And so there's no reason, in my mind, Karter, I know they love to put up threes. There's no reason for them to be coming out jacking up threes. If they go and they do it and they make them, then everyone might, be like, oh, you're such an idiot. This is what, look, if you make them, it's awesome. I'm just saying, like you're saying, new gym, cold, 2:00 game, overinflated ball, juices are flowing. Just get to the basket to start off the game. Just start the tempo. You dictate how this game's going to be. That's huge in March. The team that controls the game most often wins it. That's why teams are able to, have these upsets, is because they take these better teams out of their flow, out of their style. BYU needs to dictate the style here. They need to do it early and often. And I think if they do that, Karter, I feel very good about BYU if they can do that.
I think that's an excellent point to start off the game going in. Because the other thing is, anybody that's also played basketball knows in those bigger games like that, you got to see the ball go in early for your confidence. Certain players, it doesn't matter. The ball didn't go in right away. That's very few players. The majority of guys, they need to see that ball go in. Get to the freaking basket in this game. Overinflated balls, we don't have to repeat it. And that's why I know we've talked a lot about the two guards in this game, but that's why Richie's going to be so critical in this game too, is getting downhill. And don't, like you said, don't settle for threes early. Like you said, it's tempting around this crowd and everything, and to knock down threes early, and you can win that way. And look, if you are, then you are, and BYU's going to blow this game wide open. But getting in the paint early is going to be critical in this spot, and you don't want to see BYU go down early in the first half or have some weird little murky first half like they've had the last 3-4 games, to be honest. And a couple other things I wrote down while I was watching some VCU film. I'm curious to see, kind of like the West Virginia game a little bit and some other teams, the way they've scouted BYU. I wonder if VCU is going to sell out really hard on the three, which goes back to our point of really drive the freaking ball, because those opportunities are going to be there driving off the dribble. But I wouldn't be surprised if VCU really sold out in the three, because they see the numbers and go, oh, well, BYU knocks down, 11 threes a game or whatever, and they shoot a high clip. We got to make sure we can't let them shoot threes in this spot. And in reality, BYU's not a one-trick pony this year. That's why we love them so much. Therefore, BYU attacks the paint early. That gets VCU way out of their game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with VCU, and if you're trying to look at this from the VCU perspective, Ryan Odom, what is his game plan here? Well, you watch BYU's film, you watch their losses and their wins. They can be prone to turning it over, right? And like I said, VCU isn't so much a get in your grill, pick your pocket, but they're amazing in the passing lanes. They're amazing in their switches and being disciplined and getting steals that way. And so running them off the three and then just playing those passing lanes aggressively is going to be, I think, key for them, because I think their philosophy is going to be, we can turn these guys over, we can capitalize off of that we can win this game. So if you're Yegor, Dallin, everyone, not only do you need to be smart with the basketball, you can take advantage of that aggressiveness, because as soon as they step out to go for a steal, they sell out hard for a three. That's just leaving the paint wide open, right? Backdoor cuts, drives to the basket, all those things, which is we've talked about extensively. But this is the big reason, and a point I want to get to, why I think Yegor has one of the best games of the season Thursday, because like I've mentioned before, VCU isn't a get up in your grill team. They are a kind of play the whole floor, play those passing lanes, be in your right spot, and anticipate. And I think that's what Yegor thrives at, right? The anticipating, the flashy, amazing passes we've seen is when he's had the space, right? Some guys aren't all the way up on him, like a lot of Big 12 opponents have been, but he's able to see everything and manipulate the defense with his eyes, with his ball fakes, with his attacking, with the screens, right? And then finding the right guys. And so I think VCU is the type of team that he's really going to thrive against. And I could be wrong, and I could get burned. But I really see Yegor having a big game here because of the way VCU plays defense is different from what they've seen in the Big 12, but I think it's a good thing.
I think it is too, and I think especially if that pick and roll has success very early on, or he's having success driving to the paint early on, do not be surprised when that help defender guarding the corner three, whether it's usually Moet Mag in that spot, is going to help off a little bit and cheat off, and then Yegor hits that skip pass to the corner. I think that is going to be open for Yegor in this game. And like you said, I think this is a bit of a Yegor game, to be honest. I think this is a great spot for him because you also look at VCU's schedule and you go, oh, there's not another guard in the country that they've played remotely like these two guys together, this combo at least. This is easily the best team they faced all season. And on top of that, you go, okay, well, they played New Mexico. They're a good team, tournament team. Donovan Dent, Richard Pitino. Donovan Dent went for 40 in that game. That dude murdered this team, and that was a game in altitude as well. Like, that is a real thing. Their coach even talked about it. I promise you guys, go watch the interview with Goodman. But I think the guards have a big game here. Chase, let's get into predictions now. BYU fans are going to hate us. BYU fans are going to be mad at us. I love BYU in this spot. The film I've watched, dare I say, I kind of feel like how I did against Kansas a little bit, where I feel pretty dang confident in BYU in the spot.
I'm totally with you, Carter. And again, BYU fans may not like us if you're superstitious this way. I think everything just has lined up really well for BYU. I thought for weeks ago that VCU would be a great matchup. I love that you're in Denver. That is the perfect place to play if you're BYU. I love the time. It seems like the stars are aligning here. And on top of that, I think the style of play is better. I think BYU is going to end up being more physical. I think they're going to dictate the pace of this game and the tempo. I also think it's the biggest game of their lives. They have dudes with experience. Now, don't be wrong. VCU's got a lot of experience too. A lot of seniors on that team, but not quite in games like this. If you think about a guy like Yegor Demon, just turned 19, he's also played in legit pro European basketball games where everything was on the line. He's been in moments like this. The coaching staff has experience across the board in these moments of winner takes all, you win or go home. I think BYU's ready for this, and not to mention the avenging factor from Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders, Trevor Nell, these guys who still feel the sting of that 6-11 upset last year to the A10 champ, right, in Duquesne. So I really think the stars are aligning for this BYU team, at least in this first round.
And we talked about this on the live reveal that VCU is better than that Duquesne team last year, but BYU is much better than that BYU team of last year. But like you said, those individual players who went through that battle and that loss of the Duquesne game, think about Richie Saunders a year ago to now. That's a different player. That's a twice as good of player. Dallin Hall, much more experienced. You're so much more comfortable when Dallin's handling the ball, and everything's not as frantic when he has the ball. You're actually very calm when he has it, to be honest, at this point in his hands. And so these seniors, these more experienced guys, I don't worry about them in this spot at all, to be honest. And the other thing is, I should have mentioned this before about when, talking about how BYU needs to run them out of the gym. Well, it doesn't. VCU just had to play 3 games in 3 days. They just played on Sunday in Washington, D.C., and they have to fly to Denver on Wednesday or whenever they get there, Tuesday night, Wednesday, and then they got to play a tournament game Thursday afternoon. Meanwhile, BYU's been off since last Friday. So BYU has the rest advantage, they have the altitude advantage, and they also have the home court advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's literally not a lot of reasons to pick against BYU here other than some of the superstitious stuff. And then I will say this. I really genuinely think if BYU loses this game, it will be because they have done it to themselves. I think VCU is good, and they can do a lot of things to throw BYU off their game. But if BYU plays their game like they've been playing the last 2 months, and they play it they play it good, they play a B game here, I think they win, Carter. Unless VCU has one of an insane shooting night, I think BYU wins. If they don't, it's because they're thrown off early, they're jittery, nervous, turning the ball over, chucking up ill-advised shots early on, they fall behind, and then they are never able to get back in it. That's the only way I see them losing this, though, is that lack of energy and that lack of discipline and lack of a good game plan. And I just don't see that happening because I think this coaching staff is going to have them ready. They're going to be juiced, amped. They're going to understand the moment. They're going to realize the importance of this game, be ready, disciplined. They've had a lot of time to watch film. I think they flew to, if they haven't flown to Denver already, they're doing it tomorrow morning is my guess. They'll have a lot of time to practice and get ready for this very specific game against this very specific team. So I see them coming out with a great game plan, being ready for whatever VCU throws at them, because they probably will try something different. They might be aggressive like we've seen from these Big 12 teams, and they'll throw that press into there. But I see BYU being prepared. I see them ready. I see them handling it. I see them bringing their own energy, dictating the tempo, and walking away with a win, heading on to the round of 32.
And I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting VCU whatsoever. I think Ryan Odom is a fantastic coach, friend of the CarterCast program, shout out. But like I said, I just think this is going to be a talent disparity game, and also I'm backing the BYU coaching staff in this spot as well. Chase, score prediction, MVP time, quickly, who you got?
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, not quite as big scoring as we've seen from BYU in the past, but I do think they get up enough points. That transition really helps. They get VCU in foul trouble. I'm going to say BYU wins this game 79-69, comfy 10-point win. And it's probably not in doubt the last 5 minutes, and maybe there's some free throws or whatever here and there. So going with the Cougs by 10. And then I think the MVP, I already hinted at it before, Yegor Demmin. I think this is a really big spot for him. I think he has upwards of 8-9 assists, gets a decent amount of points, double-double watch for him. I think he finds shooters. I think BYU shoots well, and everything kind of falls into place here.
I love it. I'll go BYU 81, VCU 75, and I'll just go to the flip side of that, and I'll go with his running mate, Dallin Hall, for MVP. I think it's going to be a co-MVP award here because these two are going to dictate whether BYU wins this game, and I believe in these two guys going into March Madness, and I think they have a fantastic game, and I love BYU in this spot, man. I really do.
Yeah, I just can't wait, man. What an amazing time of the year. BYU's in the middle of it. They have a chance to win, right? A great matchup in Denver.
Yeah, and then also we were talking about it beforehand. Like, it's perfect for us because, and if you're going to watch the live show at Church Ball Pod, go watch on Twitter right after the game. We'll be live. Like, if you're watching the pod, it's perfect because there's only going to be one other game, and it's going to be Georgia-Gonzaga that's going on at that point. So we're not missing too much of the action. I'm going to have it on in the background. So, to be honest, everyone listening right now, I'm going to have one eye on that Georgia-Gonzaga game while we're watching anyways. But also, if you haven't already, sign up for if you want to buy in one, $5 buy-in CarterCast Bracket Challenge. But then the Church Ball Pod Bracket Challenge, free to enter, free, Free, one bracket per person. The prize, Eric Mika signed basketball, $40 Chili's gift card, some BYU merch, and some Church Ball merch. And then I will write you a handwritten letter saying you know ball more than I do because you'll have beaten me at that point. Chase, one of us needs to win this because that would be hilarious.
That would be hilarious, in which case the prizes would go to the runner-up, but you would not get the personalized note that you know ball better than us because if you won, then we obviously know it better. So
writing that letter to my wife might be pretty rough.
It's always the wives, dude. It's always the wives, the aunts, the random. My mom won, our family won last year. It's funny how it works, man. That's March. Unpredictable. You just never know. It's the best tournament ever created.
They're just like, I like High Point because the Panthers are purple. And you're just like, you didn't know about Alan Huss and Keza Jiffa? What's going on here? How did you know about this High Point team? Anyhow, but all right, well, make sure to subscribe. Church Ball Pod on everything, at Church Ball Pod on social media, at Chase_Rogers0, at Karter BA, and we will be live right after BYU, VCU, and then we will do a preview of their potential matchup because we will know if BYU wins, knocking on wood, big if BYU wins that game. If not, it could be a very sad podcast. So come join us after the game at Church Ball Pod and everything, and we'll see y'all next time. And shout out to everyone